human causes. That's most often the case. That was the case with our land here. I had studied biology, ecology and evolutionary biology, and I thought, wow, this is quite unusual. You have a project which is funded by private donations, which is basically focusing on indigenous tree planting. So planting the trees which are native to this land. This is highly unusual because, one, it's highly unprofitable. There is nothing to profit from when you are planting trees. We're not planting a food forest here. Even though many of these trees are naturally medicinal plants or food-producing plants, but they're not commercial food-producing plants. They're producing small dates, wild berries, things which are nice to harvest and eat when you find them, but you're not going to make money selling them in the market. So I was curious about what was going on in this place. Came on a Friday night, and after that visit I said, okay, I don't know exactly what's going on. It seems like the tree planting is going well. There's another social side of what's going on here. There were many terms that I heard, not necessarily for the first time, but terms that I wasn't so comfortable with. One was veganism. I wasn't a vegan. I had been vegetarian at some points in my life, but to me veganism was something really extreme. And I said, okay, but maybe I could check it out a little bit. I heard a term called unschooling, also referred to as natural learning. This is something we'll speak about a little bit more in a space called Children's Land. But the basic philosophy is a deep trust in the natural curiosity of people and children. A child doesn't need to be coerced into speaking. It hears you speaking, it mimics the sound, it wants to communicate, it wants to understand. So this learning all happens from the inner curiosity and drive of the child. And this is a belief that this could extend beyond just speaking, walking, and running, but to all of the skills that are necessary to us in our lives. To give an example of unschooling in practice, so we have this space up here, it's called Children's Place. If you would like to come to Children's Place, there are just a few ways. One, you can help clean it, which doesn't happen that often. Two, you can be invited by a child. This is the best way. If you don't have a child's invitation, I'm sorry, it's their space. And then the last way is, of course, if there's some kind of emergency, we're up there in a heartbeat. But otherwise, we respect their freedom and their space, and they can do as they like it here. Which means that it's not always organized to our standards, and that's okay. So my journey here, this is now my 4th time back in Sadhana Forest, and it's become something of a home to me. A place that I knew I could reliably return to, be challenged, learn, grow, meet interesting people from all over the world, and discover a little bit more about myself and the core values which are put into practice in this place. So many of you came thinking you're visiting a reforestation project, and this is certainly true. This is maybe the binding physical action of what goes on in this space, but it is just the beginning. It is one of the ways in which compassion is put into action here. And this is something of the common thread. In these very limited time frames that we have together, these short tours, we have 2 hours together, and then you have the rest of the evening. My hope is to start to play with some of the ideas of what's going on here, maybe plant some seeds in your mind, and hope that something catches, something that's interesting to you, whatever that may be. Whatever, maybe you came here because you heard it was a very visited place in Oroville, maybe there was some very specific reason, but my hope is to spark something in your mind. And at the very least, if I don't spark something in your mind, at least you're going to have a tasty meal and get to see a film, and maybe you'll enjoy this film. So let's talk about how this came to be, this space. Does anybody know the meaning of the word sadhana? What's that? Spiritual practice? Okay. Any other? There's many interpretations of this word. Discipline? So the root of the word, it's a Sanskrit word. Sadhan is an archer, and sadhana is the path of the arrow to the target. And this has come to take on a spiritual meaning, a meaning of having clear values and intentions in your life and trying to put them into practice, spiritual discipline. And this is essentially a family sadhana. This was started by a husband, wife, and their daughter, who was 3 years old when they came here. They came here to pursue their spiritual path. This was first and foremost. Planting trees, the indigenous trees, that was seen as the particular need of this land. They were not reforestation experts. They didn't study indigenous reforestation. They had a bit of experience in organic agriculture. But other than that, they were an ex-architect, an ex-CEO, who before that time, were deeply challenging why it was that they were doing what they did in their life. And this was a space for them to very actively do that. Why are we doing what we're doing? What is the drive behind it? What is it that we're hoping to achieve in our life? And so there are several core values which help us to understand this. But the more time that I spend here, the more that I come to understand that these core values are not necessarily separate. It's easier to talk about them as separate: veganism, unschooling. I'll mention a few others as well. But in fact, they all feed into one another. They're all necessary to try to really consciously live in a compassionate way. And I'll say right now, just to be clear, this is an ongoing experiment and always has been from the very beginning. So we are still in a state of deeply questioning all of the time. We are continually discovering more ways to put compassion into action, ways to refine what we're doing here, but we're an experiment. As is Oroville. So just to understand clearly our relationship with Oroville, this land that we're on, 70 acres of land in total, this is not our private land, this is Oroville land. And we're basically stewards, we're caretakers. We get to care for this land while undergoing this experiment in compassion. So I mentioned veganism and unschooling. Another of the core values that we practice here is gift economy. So this is the philosophy of giving without any expectation of receiving in return. And this relates to the dream of a moneyless economy, something very, very challenging. In our particular case, we aren't entirely moneyless. We basically are funded by private donations, which are a form of gift. But also those people who come and participate here in Sadhana Forest, they are covering the cost of their food, biodegradable hygiene products, Wi-Fi, filtered water. We can't yet cover these costs. So we do our best. We express clearly this is what we can afford to cover. We can provide for your accommodation, we can provide for these needs, but we can't cover everything. But within the community here, we can practice gift economy. We have no exchange of money. Another one of the core principles of the Advaita, it's another Sanskrit word, seva. Can anyone give a translation of seva? Service. And we use the term selfless service. And we use this instead of talking about work. When you think about work, you think about doing a particular work in order to receive a particular reward, a salary, a favor from a friend, something along these lines. The idea is to practice with that, again, and no expectation of something in return. This idea of seva, this is one of the beating hearts of what goes on. We also practice non-competition. We come from a deeply competitive environment ourselves. Anyone who's been brought up in the traditional schooling system, this is a deeply competitive system, preparing you for what we perceive as a deeply competitive world. And we'll talk a little bit more about non-competition when we get to children's land here. So this family came here basically to start fresh and see if it was possible to find a space they could live by their own values. Put these values into practice. If we talk about the history of this particular land, it used to be the tropical dry evergreen forest, which is the indigenous forest we're now planting, until about 200 years ago. Around 200 years ago, the British came into this region. They started deforesting mainly for agricultural reasons, for the production of cashews and peanuts, which were primarily used for military purpose. They were pressed for oils, which were used in weaponry. This was the main transformation of this land. We are very fortunate that there are certain areas that the British did not cut down. Any guesses where the British did not cut?
French
Very
colonies.
simple answer.
French colonies.
French colonies? It was the sacred groves around temples. So they basically didn't cut around these temple areas. They understood that these groves were very holy to the local people. And so when we're trying to understand, when scientists have been trying to understand what is the tropical dry evergreen forest, they've had to refer to these sacred groves in a few pockets of forest because this ecosystem nearly went extinct. There's only 0.01% of this ecosystem left in the world. It's only found along the coastal region of Tamil Nadu, a little strip of